I'm Bill Weiss. Welcome to the Dairy Blackbelt Podcast. My guest today is Dr. Paul Kononoff, University of Nebraska, professor and extension specialist. We're going to talk about some work you did a few years ago on basically you balanced diet, isoenergetic diets using either starch or fiber and fat. Paul, if you'd introduce the other authors on your paper, and then we'll get started.
Good. Thanks, Bill. It's good to be here. Yeah, so the lead author on this paper was Logan Morris. He was working on his Ph.D., and this was the first study in his Ph.D. He's now working with Purdue Agribusiness. And then other authors on this study was Tammy Brown Brandel. At the time, she was ag engineer at USDA Meat Animal Research Center. She's now at Nebraska. And then Kristen Hales, who does a lot of energy work with beef cattle. And then the other author was Kevin Harvatine, who helped us with some of the fat analysis.
I guess first, let's always start with the brief hypothesis, and just very brief outline of the diets, please.
Yeah. So basically, we're just generally interested in energy using the system that we have. And just to briefly outline how we do things, at the University of Nebraska, we've got a metabolism unit where we feed mostly jerseys. And in that unit, we're able to run studies where we're able to, basically what I tell people is we measure the energy that animals consume and then measure where it goes. And so the first place it goes is obviously the milk, and that's something that's fairly easy to measure. And then we do total fecal and urine collections to catch the energy in those two losses. And then we also estimate losses through heat production. And we use that, we do that through indirect calorimeters, where we measure the amount of oxygen, CO2, and methane that animals produce. And we can indirectly calculate how much heat is lost. And then, of course, baked in that is also the gaseous or the methane energy losses as well. So that was, so we're just interested in running different diets and measuring energy capture by the animals. And as you know, one of the major energy sources that we feed to dairy cattle is corn. But also a lot of nutritionists think about actually supplementing diets with rumen protected fats. And so there's always a question out there is, do cows need or benefit from energy? And does it matter what source they get it from? And so we had some cows in late lactation, and I told Logan, why don't we just work on a study where we compare some very different diets chemically and by ingredient wise, and just measure energy flow through these animals. And so the diets were pretty run-of-the-mill Northern Plain types diets. They were high in corn silage, soy, alfalfa, and then of course ground corn. And then that was the control diet. The treatment diet was very similar, except we took out obviously a lot of the corn and replaced that a little bit with, I think it was soy hulls, and then a fat supplement.
And also cottonseed hulls.
Cottonseed hulls. Yeah.
And the starch is I'm just 31 in the control and down to 17. So it's a very substantial replacement of starch for fiber.
Yeah, and then maybe just all the fat content, total fatty acid content increased from 1.9 to I think it was 4. So it wasn't
about two units added.
Yeah, so it was an increase, but maybe not a crazy increase in fat. But most of the feeds, the base feeds actually were pretty low in fat themselves. So a lot of that fat did come from the supplement source.
Yeah, I want to just, you said this, but I want to reemphasize it. In this study, you measured all these energies. In most studies, they're all calculated.
Yeah.
When you see an NEL in a book or in a paper, it's a calculated one.
Yeah.
And your formulation was a calculated net energy. And then when you measured it, you found something a little bit different.
Right.
Why don't you run us through just again on the energetics? We'll start with digestible energy, go to ME and then NEL on treatment effects, maybe.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we formulated them to be the same for NEL, but what we observed is actually quite large differences in digestible energy, metabolizable energy, and net energy, for it being actually the highest for the control diet that was high in starch.
And I also just don't think you mentioned it. Your formulation was using the old NRC model, I think.
2001.
Not the current one.
Yeah, that's correct.
Why do you think you found a difference of about 0.2 units, if I recall, 0.2 units per kilogram? Why do you think the formulated was so, the treatments were equal in the formulated, but quite different in measure? What do you think was happening there?
Well, I think, starch is a pretty straightforward energy source. And, the energy that's in corn, or starch from corn. And so it's pretty directly going from the corn to the animal. Whereas when you take energy from other sources, I think that there's some variation that exists there. So I think it's mostly because it was such a direct source of energy for the animal.
And then the MEs followed the DEs pretty much at once. The differences were pretty consistent. It didn't change much going to the ME to NEL step. Why your efficiencies for DE to ME was greater for the high starch? Why do you think that is? Because the fat you would think would increase efficiency.
Yeah. So again, it could be error in that measurement. I guess the other thing, I was taught early in my career just the importance of feeding that rumen to drive energy supply to the animal. And so I think the rumens on those diets were maybe just working at a little higher RPM, and there was more rumen fermentation that was happening in those diets.
And the thing, fat probably is more efficient on an ME basis, but fiber is less efficient too. So some of that may have just canceled out.
Yeah.
So I guess to wrap this up, I'm going to ask a question here that I don't know the answer to. But the old model didn't do very well in picking up these treatment differences. What do you think the new model would do better? Again, maybe not having the right number, but picking up a treatment effect.
The treatment effect. It should. A big advancement from 2001 from the current NASEN model is actually the input for starch. So rather than relying on NFC, and then the other one is total fatty acid is also an input into the energy equation. So I think for those two reasons, the new model should be better. I don't know if I'm missing anything else, or you can think of another reason why the new model would be better.
The new model does estimate methane directly and urine. So I do think it'd be better. You should, but in your spare time, you should put this through and see what you get.
Yeah, I'll have a look. I've taken Friday afternoon off, so maybe I'll do that.
Adiseo, a global leader in nutritional solutions and the provider of SmartAmine M. Visit milkpay.com to calculate your return on investment when you balance your feed with amino acids, and to learn how SmartAmine M is the product for dairy producers who want to optimize milk production, component levels, and the lifetime performance of their herds.
As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and especially about energy, since there's not a lot of energy guys left. So Thanks a lot, Paul.
Good. Thanks, Bill.